Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to the beautiful people here on the island of Nevis, the equally beautiful brothers and sisters over in St. Kitts, those who are throughout this Caribbean Sea, all of the islands, from the chain running from Guyana in the south up to the Bahamas in the north. Good evening to you. Good evening to our friends and family in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom. We are hopeful that we'll have an interesting show tonight. Let me say welcome to you all. My name is Mark Brantley. I'm the Premier of Nevis, but also the host of this show, and welcome to this edition of On the Mark. Every Wednesday we are here between the hours of 8 and 10 p.m. for 2 hours of primetime talk radio. We remain the only show of our kind, 2 hours of primetime radio with no commercial interruption. We're able to do that through the kind sponsorship over these past 20 years by the law firm of Daniel Brantley. I express my gratitude to them and hope that when the history of this island is written, that they will at least warrant a footnote to say that they supported freedom of speech in a very tangible way by keeping this show on the air for all of these years. So to all the lawyers and staff at Daniel Brantley, I say thank you. To Von Radio, I also express my thanks. They gave me an opportunity as a youngster to be on radio, first on Let's Talk and the Heavyweight panel, and later on the spin-off show On the Mark. And the fact that we've been here now for nigh 2 decades demonstrates the commitment and the perseverance and frankly the faith that Von Radio has had in me and this show. And I say thank you to them. We remain still current, still important, still widely viewed and listened to, still commented on, still relevant. And that is, I think, a very important thing in this day and age, to be able to maintain such relevance for all of these years. Of course, the fact that we are relevant, and the reason for that relevance, is you, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, the people of our region, those at home, those abroad, those who tune into this show. And many may not call because that is their choice, but many can tell me almost verbatim what happened on this show. In fact, this show is rebroadcast every week on Thursdays at 1 p.m. and some say it's so nice that they actually listen twice. And so some who miss it will listen on the rebroadcast, and those who hear it may also listen a second time the following day. Of course, with the modern marvels of technology, we have moved from just transmitting via radio. We are now live online on Facebook, on YouTube, and through all of the various media that the online platforms provide. I want again to thank Von Radio. They've moved with the times, and we've been online now for quite a few years, and I'm grateful to them again for that opportunity and that exposure. One of the values, ladies and gentlemen, of this show is the fact that it allows ordinary men and women, wherever they are, in the comfort of their homes, in the comfort of their beds, in the comfort of their living rooms, or even if they're relaxing on their veranda, to pick up their telephone and call and share their views not only with me but with the worldwide audience that we have on this show. That, I think, is very important. It's a very important exercise in democracy that our people have a voice, they have an opportunity to be heard, and for that I am also grateful. Of course, here on Von Radio, we set only the highest standards. Our motto, only the best will do. And so when people do call, we urge you to make your points forcefully, to argue your points strongly. But whatever we do, let us not be disrespectful of each other, and let us not seek to be disagreeable. If you call in, as some do, to make a political point, as some do, then make your political point. We have some politicians out there, and some want to be politicians, who call in sometimes and are not interested in a conversation. They're not interested in having a response. They're not interested in learning. They're merely interested in spewing whatever propaganda they have been asked to spew. And whilst, of course, that is what they choose to do, this really is not the program for that. On this program, we try to have conversations. We may not always agree, but as I often say, we need not be disagreeable. At the end of the day, we are all Kittitians and Nevisians. We are all people who have been blessed to be born in this land of beauty. And for that, I am also truly grateful. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. And as usual on the show, we have some local issues. We focus primarily on local issues, but we also have some regional and international issues. And we hope to weigh in on those and to have your views and your opinions in terms of what's happening in our country, what's happening in our region, and what's happening in the wider world. And so let's get to it. This last week, I believe it was on Friday, if memory serves, we were in the Parliament. In fact, it was on Thursday that we were in the Parliament here on the island of Nevis. And the full complement of parliamentarians was present, and we had a debate on a very short bill. In fact, the only thing that the bill did, which was the Amenities for Tourists Amendment Bill, the only thing it did was change one word in the parent legislation from 2 to 3. And I will explain to you exactly what we sought to do. For many years now, in fact, introduced by the previous NRP-led administration back in 2011 or thereabouts, we have imposed a 2% tax on hotel and guest house stays and dining at restaurants, whether they be at hotels or standalone restaurants. That 2% tax is paid by the consumer. It is paid by the person who's staying at the hotel. It's paid by the person who's staying at the guest house. It's paid by the person who is dining at the restaurant or other establishment. Put differently, if I were to go to the Four Seasons for dinner, when the bill comes and my dinner was $100, then there will be an additional $2, 1-2, that is charged to me, and that is what we refer to as the Tourism Development Levy. It has been that way now for about 14 years. We took a decision last year that we would increase that 2% to 3%. So it's now $2 if you had a $100 dinner. It will now become $3 on your $100 dinner. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to be clear that as part of that decision making process, we did what we have always done as a government. We consulted. And so we met with restaurateurs and hoteliers at a meeting at the Malcolm Gishard Recreational Park. And we engaged in a conversation with them. We explained what we wanted to do. We explained why we wanted to do it. And we sought their buy-in. I can say, because I chaired that meeting, that there were no objections to the increase, because our hotels and restaurateurs who were there, they recognize that they're not the ones paying. It is the person staying at the hotel or the person dining at the restaurant who's paying. All the hotels, guest houses, and restaurants do is they collect the tax from their customer and pass on that tax to the government. Just like the 10% VAT that is charged on hotel stays and restaurants and the like, they collect it and they pass it on to the government. Put differently, it is not coming out of the hotelier's pocket. It is not coming out of the restaurateur's pocket. The restaurant is not being asked to pay a tax on their earnings or on their revenue. They're merely collecting that additional sum. So put differently, going back to my example, if you went out to dine at the Four Seasons and your bill was $100, that $100 goes to the Four Seasons. That's their revenue. The 2% Tourism and Development Levy is an additional charge to the customer. And so that $2 is also on your bill. But Four Seasons collects their $100 plus that $2, and they collect that $2 to pass it on to the government. The 2% is not levied on Four Seasons' $100. I hope you understand what I'm saying. And so when we look at the composition of this Tourism and Development Levy, it really impacts primarily tourists. Yes, if you are a local person and you go out to dine, or if you're a local person, you choose to spend time at a local hotel or guest house, then you would also have to pay the tax. But when we look at the composition over the years of the Tourism and Development Levy, it is obvious that the largest contributors to that tax are the hotels. And that's obvious because the hotels, and in particular our flagship, the Four Seasons, that's where most people who come to the island would stay. And so they are our most significant contributors, followed by the larger restaurants in terms of the amounts that we have collected. Now, in 2024, the amount collected was just about $3.1 million, representing 2% levy, if you will. And that $3.1 million, we feel, can be significantly more. It can be more because we do feel that many restaurants, hotels, and guest houses aren't charging the tax to the customer, and if they are, and they are collecting it, they're not then paying it over to the Inland Revenue. I've given the Inland Revenue very strict instructions to ensure that the government collects the taxes due to the government, because, as I say, it is not a tax levied on the restaurateur. It is not a tax levied on the hotelier. It is in fact levied on the consumer, the customer. And therefore, that hotel or restaurant or guest house owner is simply collecting it for it to then be passed on to the government. So if you're charging the customer and collecting that 2% and keeping it, then that is an offense, because it is not your money to keep. Going back to my example, at the Four Seasons, $100 meal, the $100 is the Four Seasons' money. The extra $2 created is paid by the customer and belongs to the government, and it should be paid over to the government. But we have looked at some significant initiatives. We are revamping the Nevis Tourism Authority. We are looking at additional staff. We're looking at the premises. We're looking at promotions that are being done for the island. We're looking at a complete rebranding of the island of Nevis in the tourism market. All of us are familiar with Nevis naturally. That has been our tagline now for over 20 years. And there's a feeling that we ought to have something new and fresh and exciting. And so we've been working very closely with a firm called Tambourine that we've hired to lead this new initiative for us. We are going out to the market and we're engaging in our key markets, and we are in fact engaging now with new demographics, new individuals, as we try to tap into a more diversified market for our tourism product. And already, ladies and gentlemen, I think that it has been bearing fruit. We're seeing more African Americans coming, wealthy African Americans, particularly from along the eastern seaboard of the United States, and we hope to see that continue. But we recognize that it costs money. And the connection between the Tourism and Development Levy and the Nevis Tourism Authority is because it is from that 2% that we use to fund the marketing of the island of Nevis. That's their budget. So last year, for example, their budget would have been the $3.1 million that they collected. It's a shoestring budget, very small compared to other jurisdictions, very small compared even to St. Kitts next door. But it speaks to the quality of the people at the NTA that we have continued to succeed despite the small budgets that we have been allocated. When we met with the hoteliers, the guest house owners, and the restaurateurs, while they had no objection to the tax moving from 2 to 3%, they did indicate that the timing of it was important to them because many of them had what we call advanced sales. Put differently, many of them were saying that people have already booked who are coming later in the year, and therefore would have calculated, and the hotels and restaurants would have calculated their charges on the basis of the 2%. And we listened, as we do as a government. And so notwithstanding that we went into the Parliament last week to amend the legislation to add that 1% extra, we have indicated that this will not come into effect until June of 2025. The intention, therefore, is that by the time the new tourism season starts on around October, November of 2025, that it is at that juncture that the 3% would come into full effect. Now, one would have thought, ladies and gentlemen, that what I have said is rather simple. In fact, as I indicated, this bill was perhaps one of the shortest bills ever presented to the Parliament here in Nevis, because all the bill did was change one word in the parent ordinance from 2 to 3. And we all anticipated that the debate would take all of half an hour, if so much, because we really saw nothing controversial. And the reason I say nothing controversial is twofold. One, it is not a tax on our people. The only way it affects our people, that is people living here, is if they go out to a restaurant to eat or they choose to stay at a hotel or guest house. We expect that this tax, predominantly 90+% of it, will fall on those who are visiting Nevis and staying at our hotels and choosing to dine out at our restaurants. That's point number one. Point number two is that the increase is nominal. And let me just use some basic mathematical calculations. Going back to that bill, you go out to eat and your bill is $100. Now, under the current law, you would pay an extra $2 as your tourism and development levy. Once this 1% takes effect, you will move from paying $2 to paying $3. And so instead of paying $102, you'll pay $103. Now, if you dined at an expensive restaurant and your bill was $1,000, then currently you would pay an additional $20, representing the 2%. With this additional 1%, you will now pay $30 on a bill of $1,000. So your bill yesterday would have been $1,020. After this comes into effect, it will be $1,030. So this represents an additional 1%. If your bill was $50, it represents an additional 50 cents. And I want to use those numbers because when viewed in its proper context, this additional tax is nominal. In fact, as we look around the region, we know that this tax is nominal. Ladies and gentlemen, this was an initiative that was well thought through. We discussed it in terms of Ministry of Finance, and we consulted the stakeholders on it. And I've shared with you the results of that consultation. In my budget presentation last year, I indicated that this was to be increased. And so I was quite astonished during the sitting of the Parliament last week that the members opposite decided to attack this proposal and this legislation. And what we anticipated would have been a 30-minute engagement in the House turned into a few hours, because each of the members opposite got up and spoke to the bill, as is their right. Let me be clear. But for the life of me, it seemed that they simply did not understand what was being proposed. In fact, I recall one member suggesting that the hotels and guest houses and restaurants cannot afford this tax and they will have to pass it on to their customers. And I was perplexed, because I said, what do you mean pass it on to the customers? The tax is always to be levied on the customer. The hotel, restaurant and guest house operator is not paying that tax out of his or her pocket, out of their pockets. Then we heard that hotels and guest houses are going to close down. We heard that business will flee to other islands because I suppose if you can afford a meal for $1,000 and they were to dare tell you that you have to pay an additional $10, that certainly will cause you to flee to another jurisdiction. The usual fear mongering, misinformation, and efforts at really creating controversy where there's none. Now, what I find fascinating is that the Honorable Troy Liburd on the government side got up and he explained quite clearly what it was that we were doing. He explained quite clearly that this increase would have no impact on the restaurants, hotels, and guest houses because no tax is levied on them called the Tourism and Development Levy. The Honorable Spencer Brand, the good member for number 1 Charlestown, he got up and he reiterated the point that this was not a tax on our hotels, guest houses, and restaurants. And would you believe that the members of the opposition still appeared not to get it? I eventually got up to wrap up, and I was forced to go over it again in painstaking fashion and explain yet again that this was not a tax on our local hotels, restaurants, or guest houses. But no matter how many times we explained, it just seemed impossible to break through. In fact, I got a call from an investor just, I believe it was a few nights ago, who said that he happened to be in a taxi and listening to a news item and heard one of the members opposite in the news attacking us about taxing and causing people to shut down their business because of taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is hard to have a debate when those involved in the debate do not inform themselves about the issues. I do not mind when people disagree with me or disagree with my government. There's a word for that. It's called democracy. Some do not like it. Some think it's messy. But it is democracy at work. And every man and every woman, every voter, every non-voter, every person has a right to their views. However, they do not have a right to their own facts. There could only be one set of facts. Only one story can be factual. I do not mind people expressing their views, but when we enter the Parliament, we ought to, in the Parliament, have the best demonstration of an articulation of different views and opinions on a matter. Some like the harsh tones and the cussing, but however it is couched, in whatever tone it is presented. The question is, are we getting the best ideas, suggestions, the cut and thrust of debate in our Parliament? If there are members in the Parliament who simply do not understand what it is they're there to do, have done no research, have done no preparation, and simply do not comprehend what is before them, it makes it very difficult to have a responsible and sensible debate. When in a simple matter where you are increasing a tax by 1% from 2 to 3%, and levying that quite clearly on accommodation and on meals served in restaurants, that individual will stand up and say that we are taxing hotels and taxing restaurants and taxing guest houses. and that they're going to shut down and go out of business because they can't afford the tax. Where do we go from there? If that basic understanding of what is afoot is lost and cannot, it appears, be found, because notwithstanding efforts to guide and to say this is not in fact what is intended, those efforts did not bear fruit. We also heard a claim being made by the opposition that our decision to develop Pinnis Beach, that decision was causing the bars and restaurants in Charlestown to lose business and to close down. And again, I commented on it in the House, but I'll comment on it here again, because it strikes me as an exceedingly curious argument to advance. Everywhere I go in this Caribbean, I see the impact of tourism across the length and breadth of the islands and countries in the region. In Jamaica, tourism is dispersed all across Ocho Rios, Montego Bay, Portland, you name it. In Barbados, I had the pleasure of visiting Barbados recently, and on the different coasts in Barbados you have various hotels, restaurants. Somebody told me I should go to some place in Whole Town. What they say? Street 1 and Street 2 are number 1 street and number 2 street. I can't remember the names, but that's an area. Right next to in St. Kitts, there's a strip, bars, restaurants, concentration of entertainment. I'm certain anywhere you go in Anguilla, you go to the West End, you have hotel after hotel, restaurant after restaurant in the West End. Antigua, you have Jolly Harbour, places like those. St. Lucia, you have Gros Islet. Everywhere we go, we see that is a model. But somehow in Nevis, it's wrong. I have seen, ladies and gentlemen, and heard even our harshest critics comment on the absolute beauty of what we've created, the genius of what we've created at Pinnis Beach. I've seen it and I've heard it. I saw something up to recently where some chap was here with his family and said he had not been here in a few years, and he could not get over the transformation that has happened at Pinnis Beach. Where they had 1 or 2 bars, they now have, I believe my last count was either 8 or 9 establishments down there, offering a variety of food and drink and entertainment. It has become a mecca. But that is not to suggest that other places on the island, including Charlestown, are losing business because we invested in Pinnis. We ought to know, and we should know as individuals, that we all have our own taste. There's some who will go to Pinnis for whatever reason. There's some who will go in Lyman Town for whatever reason. And when we look at the tourism product in Nevis, you have Golden Rock up in the mountains in Gingerland. You have bananas up in the mountains in Hamilton. You have passions in the heart of Cox. You have Rodney's Cuisine there in Stony Grove. You have Drift by the airport. You have Luna. You have all these restaurants. And they traverse the length and breadth of Nevis. Nevis is only 20 miles, they say, the perimeter road, the island main road. And therefore, in 20 minutes, half an hour perhaps, you would cover that distance. Nowhere Nevis is far. And I've just listed a number of restaurants. I could list 100 more. And they're scattered to the four corners of this island. And guess what? People find them. Most of them at this time of year, you cannot get a reservation. And people find them because people go where they want to go. People choose to dine and to be entertained where they choose. So are you going to say, for example, that if the government licenses a restaurant to operate in the hills of Hamilton, in the hills of Gingerland, Rollins Mountain, that is causing businesses in Charlestown to close down? It just doesn't pass the test in terms of, again, that level of reasoned debate that we ought to have in our parliament. And I say it because it is so. It is not about sometimes just bashing the government for the sake of bashing the government. It is not sometimes just talking for the sake of talking. Sometimes it's better not to say anything if one has nothing to say and nothing substantive to offer to a debate. I have had many situations where when I appeared before the courts, the Court of Appeal would have 3 judges. And one judge writes the decision. You know what the other 2 judges say? I concur. That's it. 2 words. I concur. Put differently, there's nothing more to add. So we need, I think, to get to that point in terms of our level of debate and engagement. And I will leave that there for now. But as I say debate and engagement, I want to go on record to congratulate our young debaters who went to St. Martin and represented Nevis proudly in the Leeward Islands debating competition. I recognize that they were not successful in winning again that competition, and I also recognize that perhaps they struggled under the weight of expectation, because from all that I heard, this was one of the best debating teams that Nevis has ever fielded. And I got that from debaters, past debaters themselves, who said that they were blown away at the capacity and the ability and the intellect and the acumen and the oratory and the fluency of these young debaters. But we understand the cut and thrust of competition. And so on that night, Nevis was unsuccessful, and therefore we were not able to advance to the finals and to compete for the trophy this year. I, however, as Premier of Nevis, want to say to these youngsters that I and the entire cabinet, the entire administration, we are proud of you. And we thank you for representing us and doing so with style and with flair and with panache, and doing so in a truly Nevisian way. We well remember last year when we triumphed. And while we would have loved to have triumphed again this year, I remind us all that it's not just the competition and winning that matters. It is also the camaraderie. It is also meeting new people. It is also developing friends across our sub-region. And I am certain that these debaters would have acquitted themselves well. We have had no adverse reports from them or the delegation that went with them. And I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart and to wish them ongoing success. I know some perhaps are moving on because this might be their last year, but others will come through. And we know we have a very strong tradition of debate on the island of Nevis. And I always believe that good debaters make for good citizens, because debate forces you to reason. It forces you to speak. It forces you to articulate your position, and to do so based on some substance. And so I say kudos to them, congratulations to them. Now today, through the intervention of a Mr. Sean Revan, whom I had not hitherto met, I was privileged, and I consider it indeed a privilege, to spend some time this morning with over 40 students, grade 5 students, from the Dr. William Connor Primary School on St. Kitts. They came over to Nevis on a field trip, and they very proudly said that they were visiting me, and then they were going to the hot baths, then they were going to the MJR Park, and they were potentially also going to the Botanical Gardens. The majority of them had been to Nevis before, but a few of them told me they had not visited Nevis before, and this therefore was their first trip. I want to thank publicly Mr. Revan and the sponsors that came with him, the chaperones that came with him. I want to thank these students. My heart was full this morning because I felt so proud to be in the company of these youngsters who were bright, they were articulate, they were outgoing, they had manners and respect. And I want to say kudos to the entire team at the Dr. William Connor Primary School, because if this grade 5 students that I commixed and commingled with this morning are an example, it means that that school is a shining example of what education ought to be in our federation. And so I say thank you to Mr. Revan and his team, and it was an absolute honor and privilege of mine to spend time with these children today. I am absolutely persuaded that the future of our beloved federation is indeed in good hands. When I asked them what they wanted to do in life, oh, so many of them answered. I had to stop after a while. I couldn't keep up. And I will have the people of Nevis know that at least 2 of them said that their goal in life was to be Premier of Nevis. So you must watch out, because the students from the Dr. William Connor Primary School have indicated, at least 2, that their goal is to be Premier of Nevis. One said that he would be the Prime Minister. One said that he would be a 100-meter sprinter, and he wanted to be a sprint champion. And when I said to him, like Kim Collins, he says yes, and also like Usain Bolt. Grade 5 student. I was incredibly happy, incredibly impressed, and I praise God and thank God for them. I have checked. I know that they had a good time, because I checked with their teacher. They had a good time in Nevis, and that they have returned safely to St. Kitts. We actually need more of that. And so I'm using this bully pulpit to encourage all the schools in St. Kitts. Plan field trips to Nevis. Let the children come over and see this part of the federation. And I say the same thing to the schools in Nevis. Plan field trips to St. Kitts. Go over and let the youngsters see that part of the federation. We are one country, and everything that we can do to expose each other to all that the country has to offer, the better. Now, I'll take just a few more minutes, ladies and gentlemen. We have seen recently quite some furor or furore, it depends on how you want to pronounce that word, concerning efforts being made by the United States government to isolate the government and people of Cuba even more than they have been isolated already. I have had the privilege of visiting Cuba. The Cubans that I've interacted with are a proud people. They are an educated people. They are a resilient people. And it is, for me, a tragedy that in 2025, the people of Cuba are still suffering. And when I say suffering, I use that word because that is what it is. from an embargo from the United States of America. An embargo which was a byproduct of a Cold War which has long been extinguished. And I marvel at the fact that in World War II, let me use the last Great War, you had Germany, Japan, Italy, and their allies on one side, and you had the United Kingdom, other European nations, those that had not been conquered, Canada, United States, the people of the Caribbean who fought in that Great War, including some from right here in St. Kitts and Nevis on the other side. There was great suffering, great loss of life. Man's inhumanity to man was at its highest. And yet, from that Great War emerged peace. And the antagonists and former enemies, for the most part, became friends. Germany was in fact rebuilt not by German money, but rebuilt by investment that flowed in. I believe, I hope my history is right, it was called the Marshall Plan. You had a situation where the victors turned around and assisted the vanquished. And today, Germany is one of the strongest economies in the world. Japan is one of the strongest economies in the world. And they're all friends with the United Kingdom and the United States and others. And so I continue to ask myself rhetorically, if it is that people who are formerly at war, who shed each other's blood, can now be at peace and work together, why is it that the people of Cuba who have shed no American blood have not been at war with the United States? Why is it that they continue to suffer since the 1960s until now? I am, as I sit here, with the grace of God, 56 years old. The embargo on Cuba is older than me. And for what? To what end? The former Soviet Union, which was in the Cold War with the United States, is no more. It has broken up. Cuba and the embargo on Cuba is the last vestige of a Cold War which is no more. And in 2025, we now have a situation where the United States of America, that shining candle on the hill, that beacon, that country which for years said, send us your tired and your poor, send us your oppressed, send us your people. We are building a great nation, the greatest tapestry that the world has ever seen. This experiment called America. And for a long time, America was that beacon of hope for people all across this globe, including people right here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so today, we see an America that is holding fast to an embargo which has long passed its relevance, political and otherwise. has no military or national security significance, but is purely and absolutely punitive. Now I want to say this because it is appropriate that I say this, that these types of embargoes, these types of sanctions, you think that they ever prevented Fidel Castro or Raul Castro or the current president from having a meal? Prevented them from getting their children educated or accessing medical care? We must be honest that sanctions hurt populations, that embargoes hurt populations, and that it is the Cuban people who are suffering. And I don't think that I'm saying anything that is controversial. This embargo has hurt the people of Cuba. It did not succeed in dislodging Fidel Castro. Fidel was succeeded by his brother Raul. It did not succeed in ousting Raul Castro. And yet it continues. One would have thought if Fidel Castro was the bogeyman, then Fidel is now of blessed memory, that this would be no more. But it has continued. Now Cuba has been good to St. Kitts and Nevis. Cuba has been good to the Caribbean. Cuba has been good to the world. Many may not wish to recognize it or to articulate it, but even in the wars in Africa where people fought for their freedom, in places such as Angola, fought against the apartheid regime in South Africa, Cuba was a beacon of hope for many down-pressed and downtrodden people around the world. I saw a recent photograph of a dozen or so young doctors standing outside the Alexandria Hospital. And as I go through each of those youngsters, young professionals in that photograph, I see young people from poor families, from the villages, from the byways, the hamlets, the towns on Nevis. And I reflect that virtually all of them became doctors and were educated, not at our expense, nor at the expense of their families, but at the expense of the Cuban people. It is the Cuban government that offers scholarships for so many of our youngsters to find a pathway out of poverty, to build a profession and build themselves, and hopefully raise their standard of living and that of their children and their children's children to come, to lift themselves up out of poverty. Cuba, despite its own challenges, has always been there for us. And those 12 young doctors are a shining example of what that cooperation has brought to the people of Nevis, more specifically to the wider Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and in fact to the wider Caribbean region. Our own Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew is a product of the Cuban medical education system. I believe we had a former doctor who was in the parliament, Dr. Asim Martin, and if memory serves, he too is a product of the Cuban medical system. I can list them on and on. Engineers, people trained in agriculture, products of scholarships from Cuba. Cuba reminds me of that devout Christian who, despite his poverty, goes to his church and finds a way to leave some offering as his way of thanking God, that despite his hardship, despite his poverty, that he is still willing to give of the little that he has to his God. It reminds me of a man who is hungry and gets a single loaf of bread, but decides to share that single loaf, which is not even enough for him, with others who are equally hungry. That to me has been Cuba. Now, am I going to sit here tonight and say Cuba is perfect? That everything that happens in Cuba is correct? That Cuba is a democracy in the way that we practice democracy and no democracy? I can't say those things. But there is no system, ladies and gentlemen, in the world which is perfect. None. Even in the great United Kingdom, that bastion of freedom, we were taught about the Bill of Rights. Even in that great country, I just learned recently that people could be arrested now, protesters, what they say and how they choose to protest and what the issues are that they're protesting. That is now sweeping legislation that they could be arrested. I'm afraid that what we are seeing happening around the world is a retreat from decency, a retreat from morality, a retreat from mutuality of respect. And we're seeing a race towards brutality, towards war, towards that sense that might is right. And we will get to a very dark place in this world if we continue on that pathway that says that only might matters. That once you have the military muscle and the capacity to wage war, then only your view matters. The people of Cuba have been collectively punished for decisions that have been made by those who are in power in that country. But notwithstanding that collective punishment, notwithstanding the very real hardship that that punishment has caused, and if you don't want to accept my word for it, and you have not visited there, speak to some of our students who have studied there. Ask them about their experience and how things that we here in Nevis take for granted. Everything we want is at the supermarket. Driving grabbing a taxi, electricity 24/7, water 24/7, everything that we take for granted here. Ask them how those things are in Cuba. And yet, our healthcare systems around our region and right here in St. Kitts and Nevis, not only do we have Cuban trained local doctors, nurses and other professionals, we also have Cuban doctors, nurses and other health professionals who assist us. The United States has alleged that there is some element of forced labor, that these Cuban doctors, nurses and others are being forced to work and send back money to the Cuban government. I can only speak to what I know. And I know that the Cuban professionals, nurses and doctors who work in Nevis at the Alexandria Hospital, that they are paid the same salary as our local nurses and doctors. They are provided accommodation. They are free to go wherever they want to go. They are afforded their holidays like everybody else. Put differently, they are treated no differently to any local professional, doctor or nurse. And so, I can only surmise that if the Cubans here are involved in forced labor, then so are our own people, because there's no difference in work conditions. And so I can't speak, and the United States, as a great power, must know what evidence it has to support its claims. But I know for Little Nevis, and based on conversations I have had with the Honorable Prime Minister, he has assured me that in St. Kitts equally, that those who have come from Cuba to offer their services as doctors and nurses and other medical professionals are treated the same way in terms of pay and benefits as our own Kittitian and Division doctors and nurses and other medical professionals. They are not subject to any let or hindrance. They are free to do what they want with their money. Bank it, spend it, holiday with it. No restrictions. And so I can't speak to what may happen elsewhere. But I believe I can speak to what happens in Nevis. And based on the assurance of the Honorable Prime Minister, who is also the Minister with responsibility for health in St. Kitts, what happens on our sister island, St. Kitts. It therefore means that the charges that those who have come are involved in some form of forced labor, that in our context here in St. Kitts and Nevis, those charges are false. In fact, I will add this. Many of our Cuban professionals, our brothers and sisters, our Caribbean brothers and sisters who have come, have decided to stay. Many have married locally and started families. Well, again, I can't see how you could do that if you are in forced labor. If you are a slave, because that's what forced labor is. Well, how could you decide that you would stay and have a life and get married and start a family and do all that? And so, as I said, I can't speak to what may exist elsewhere. And I am not sitting here tonight mounting any defense of anyone or anything or any country except St. Kitts and Nevis. And I say with respect to the great United States of America, We have been friends since time immemorial. There's a long umbilical cord connecting St. Kitts and Nevis, and more specifically the island of Nevis, to the great United States. In fact, one of your founding fathers was a Nevisian, born right here in Charlestown, Alexander Hamilton. The first settlers that settled in Virginia, I'm told, sailed from St. Kitts. We are inextricably connected. And what is true of St. Kitts and Nevis is true of the rest of the Caribbean region. Caribbean people have contributed significantly to that great civilization that is America. And I say therefore to our friends in the United States, let us not squander centuries of goodwill, centuries of cooperation, centuries of assistance, centuries of like-mindedness, and an effort to coordinate in terms of our commitment to democracy, to transparency, to openness, to good governance, to free and fair elections, to peace and stability throughout the world, to our support of multilateral institutions, and our abiding support and commitment to the rule of law. Let us not squander that. We understand that presidents will come and go, premiers will come and go, prime ministers will come and go. But what ought to bind us is our core belief. Our core belief in justice, freedom, in peace, security, and in equality of all people. And so I urge our people, wherever they are, those at home, those in the diaspora, to lend their voices to important issues such as these. To speak where they can to their congressmen, to their councilmen, to their city and state elected officials, and that we create such a crescendo with our voices of reason, our voices of restraint, our encouragement to the world and those that are powerful in this world, that power ought to be used to help and not to hinder, to lift up and not to oppress. In that, ladies and gentlemen, we can lend our voice. And I urge us all to do so. It is 5 minutes past the hour of 9 o'clock. I'm going to open the lines. The numbers are 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. And we go directly to the lines and say, good evening, you are on the mark. Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening to
Psalm
you.
67 verse 3 and 4. Let the people praise thee, O God. Let all the nation praise thee. Oh, let the nation be glad and sing for joy. For thou shalt judge the people righteously and govern the nation upon the earth. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Beautiful scripture. Thank you for sharing. We're taking your calls. 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. Those are the numbers to call if you'd like to be a part of the show. And we have been talking about a few things already this evening. We talked about the Parliament recently concluded here. We talked about the beautiful visit that I had from some grade 5 students from the Dr. William Connor Primary School in St. Kitts. And we have lastly been talking about the situation involving Cuba and Cuba's position in the Caribbean, position in the world, and its contribution to the people here of the island of Nevis and the wider Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. The numbers again are 869-469-1616 and 869-469-1700. We'll be delighted to take your calls on those numbers as we move through the final phase of the show, which is about another 56 or so minutes that we have left. We urge you therefore to use that time to call in. Oftentimes people chastise me and say that they are not able to get in or they're not able to share their views, but we have moments like these when there are no calls, and that is why I urge people to call in. If you get in early, you get an opportunity to ventilate your views and to say what is on your mind. Alright, so while we wait for the phones to ring, and I hope they will ring, I want to go on record to congratulate the Honorable Eric Evelyn. I'm told he had a very successful cleanup there in Gingerland, white goods cleanup, and I know that he knows because the members of the CCM team, we do these cleanups at different points of the year, and so I would anticipate that in all of the parishes we will have similar events taking place. We urge folks who have white goods, old stoves, fridges, microwaves, etc., that you dispose of them properly. I say that because sometimes they're left outside, they catch water, that water then becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and we have to be mindful that we keep our surroundings clean. In fact, I can advise that we will be launching a campaign soon about cleanliness on the island. We'll be launching a campaign soon about safety and safety tips on our roads. We'll be launching multiple campaigns about various things of importance here on the island of Nevis. So if you start to see some funny looking cartoons, the idea is to make you laugh but also make you think, and that's what we are embarking upon here, a really significant education campaign that we intend to employ here on the island of Nevis. So I want to commend Minister Evelyn, our Deputy Premier. He is definitely the man for Gingerland. He has demonstrated all of his life the commitment that he has to people, and as a consequence he continues to give back. I had the pleasure yesterday of spending time with him and with the Honorable Spencer Brand as we did a tour of a significant part of Nevis. In fact, we started in Gingerland and we went around from the Gingerland side, and we eventually ended up, I believe, at the Rocks, which is there at the water taxi facility. We visited various installations, various private and public sector initiatives, and I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I was blown away by what I'm seeing happening in Nevis. I was blown away by the entrepreneurship that I saw. We visited one smoothie shop. I'm struggling to remember the name now, but it is right there. It is led by Miss Fergus. She was once Culturama Queen. Keisha, I think her first name is, and it is right across from the Anglican Church there in St. James, and absolutely phenomenal. And to hear Miss Fergus tell us that she makes smoothies, and so she is now farming so that the produce from her farm she's using in her smoothies. So from farm straight into her smoothies. And I thought, to look at a young woman who came up with this idea and decided that she's not just going to make smoothies. She said that buying fruits all the time for smoothies, that was quite an expensive undertaking, and so she decided to do some farming. And she in fact allowed us to taste some watermelons. I must confess I'm not a fan of watermelon, but it's the sweetest watermelon I've ever tasted. And it was quite funny, I'm sure, in time when the pictures or videos surfaced, to see the three of us in jacket and tie trying to eat watermelon and not get it on our clothing. It was quite funny. But I was very impressed, because I said, here's a young woman who's not sitting back, who's not looking for any handout, who is trying to do something, seeing an opportunity to do her smoothie business, but then saying, hey, I can make my business better by growing some of the fruits that I use. And as I said, she had just taken over a crop of watermelon. In fact, one melon was brought out which I said was over 40 pounds and sweet. As we went around, we went by the water taxi facility and we were able to greet some folks as they came off. We had conversations with Islander, Mr. Vincent Perkins, and with the persons who have Blue Wave as well, the two main water taxi operators. And again, the conversations were meaningful and impactful. What is happening? How has our insignificant investment in that facility helped them and helped their business? And I heard something there that I was surprised at, that in fact the boaters are saying that they may actually need more berthing spots. They need a longer pier, because they're saying that the passenger movements, that it has grown so significantly over at Wally, that this is something that we ought to think about for the future. And then when we left the pier, we walked and were guided by none other than the veteran in terms of hospitality, Dan Perkins. And we went and we walked and we went to the rocks. I'll take this call and then I'll come back to tell you about my experience on the rocks. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Hello.
Yes, you're on the air, go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Tell me something. I know you're supposed to be getting a new airport, extension to the airport. Can you tell me exactly what time you are going to start it? Would it be this year?
Yes, the plan is definitely to start it this year. In fact, I would want to suggest that we will start it before the middle of this year.
Before the middle
of this year. That is the intention, yes.
Middle of this year?
Yes, I said before the middle of this year. That is the intention to start that project.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And caller, if you have any more questions, as you know, we've had a series of town hall events already, public consultations on that project, and it is, I believe, possible that we will have one final consultation as we finalize all the designs and everything else. We are concluding our funding arrangements. We are hoping to very shortly conclude our purchase of the lands to build this airport. So we anticipate that we should, all things being equal, be in a position to actually have shovels in the ground before the middle of this year. And we are told that the project should be about 16 to 18 months. And so our hope, caller, is that we will have a brand new facility by 2026. I think that is the hope. Christmas, December of 2026. That's what we're aiming for. And we are hopeful that we can achieve that, because the anticipation is that the east side aspects, that is the runway, etc., that will be done at the same time as we're doing the land side aspects. So that is now the terminal and the new island main road, etc. But going back, while we wait for the phones to call, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking because I don't have any calls. But if you want to call, then the numbers are 869-469-1616 and 1700. I invite you to call. You hear me coughing already, that means I'm talking too much. So if you're out there and you have something you want to say, this is a good time for you to call. But let me go back to tell you about the rocks. Because we took that walk. Please forgive me, let me have some water. So we took the walk from the pier at Wally and we went to the Rocks, which is a new restaurant. And let me tell you, if you have not been there yet, you need to check it out, because the views from the new restaurant are just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And it's interesting to see how, again, local investors have made that connection and say, listen, the pier has been built, the government has invested in the pier, we now can do a restaurant here and a place that people can use for greetings and departures, saying goodbyes and waiting to pick up friends and family as they come off, etc. The two go hand in hand. And again, local investors, local idea, beautifully executed. And you can now walk from the dock along a pathway and right to the rocks. Equally, you can be at the rocks hanging out, having lunch, having your meal, having dinner, having some drinks, and then you walk along the pathway and you catch your next ferry going to St. Kitts. I was again impressed by the entrepreneurship. Then Minister Brand took great pleasure in taking us to two projects. One, the desalination plant that is at Maddens. And then he took us to the new wells that have been dug also at Maddens, as we continue to deliver to the people of Nevis more water as we committed that we would do. I think it's a badge of honor that the people of Nevis can boast that they have water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whenever there's a disruption, it means that there is some problem, and that problem is often corrected quickly. We should not take these things for granted. In fact, I said to Minister Brand, as we drove up to Maddens, we met a crew from the water department that were laying new polyurethane pipes coming down that area from the prison farm coming down. And I said to Mr. Brand, I said, you know, had I not seen those youngsters doing the work, all that we would have had would have been people driving on a road not realizing the level of investment that is under the road, because they have excavated, they lay in the pipes, and then they backfill. And you, the members of the public, would have no idea that you are every day driving on our roads and you're driving over tremendously expensive infrastructure that has been put there to ensure that we have things like running water in our homes and in our businesses. And so I was very impressed with that. I was even more impressed when the minister informed us that so competent were our technical people in Nevis that St. Kitts has reached out and said, could we send a few of our team members and a bit of equipment called a butt fusion machine to lend some assistance in works that are currently planned by the water department in St. Kitts. It was in a similar way that we lent equipment and manpower recently to our sister St. Kitts on the construction of roads over there. I feel proud to say that because it demonstrates the level of investment we have made, not only in equipment but in training. And on that note, let me take this call. Good evening, you're on the mark. Hello?
Good evening, Mr. Premier.
Good evening. I was just calling your name about your cleanup. How are you doing?
Yes, I did hear you.
Yes.
So I'm calling because I wanted to say, well, yes, the cleanup went very well. It was very successful. We had loads and loads and loads of white goods. And I think sometimes people underestimate how important these cleanups are, because as you rightly indicated, some of these white goods could be receptacles for water, and we know how many mosquito-borne diseases we have issues with sometimes. Some of these white goods could be places for rodents to breed, and so it is important that we do these cleanups every now and again. I must say that I was heartened because I got several WhatsApp messages from persons who would have been able to dispose of their white goods freely, and so persons were very, very appreciative of the gesture, very thankful of the initiative. It is something that I've committed to do every year during the first quarter, and so it's normally done between January and March. And so I want to thank all who were involved, all the truckers, all the helpers, and all who took advantage of doing this, because I still believe we still have a lot of persons who are doing indiscriminate dumping, and they need to stop. And when we organize these initiatives, people need to take advantage. It's absolutely no cost to them, and so they need to take advantage. And the people of Ginterland have been taking advantage of the initiative every year that it is organized. And I want to thank persons for really rallying and ensuring that their white goods get to the landfill, and they're not keeping them at home, or they're not dumping them indiscriminately. I want to continue to encourage people all across Nevis to desist from this indiscriminate dumping practice. Let us continue to keep our environment clean. I wanted to also endorse what you were saying regarding the visit that we were on yesterday, Honorable Premier. And I too want to congratulate the businesses that we visited. I want to particularly speak to the two businesses that were agriculture related, and that is the A1 Farms. Of course, we all know Mackey's a veteran now when it comes to shade house technology, and he and the other shade house farmers have really taken it to another level on the island of Nevis. And when we visit these farms and we see what is happening, it almost looks like you're not in Nevis when you look at the shade house here with the cucumbers, when the cucumber vines are almost at the top of the shade house, and they have to use ladders to go up and pick and harvest the cucumbers. When we look at the quality of lettuce that we see there, it's unbelievable. And I was really very, 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 very happy when we visited the young lady there at Potworks,
yes,
KL Blends,
okay,
from farm to blender. And when you look at a beautiful young lady like Keisha and see what she's doing there, and especially the fact that she is now actually doing her own farming, I was really pleased with the quality of the products that she's actually harvesting from her farm. Apart from the watermelon and so on, she had some excellent quality butternut squash there, which she said will be, marketed through the Department of Agriculture. And I was also very pleased because she also indicated that the Department of Agriculture would have been of assistance to her. During COVID, we were practically giving everything away to our farmers and our backyard gardeners. And I keep saying that there is no other island or country in the region that would have done this for their farmers. We gave away practically everything. We were giving free wire, free seeds, free seedlings, free labor, free land preparation, free fencing. And she was able to indicate that the fencing that she would have received during the COVID-19 pandemic was able to assist her greatly in ensuring that she can now farm. And it is testimony to the fact that this administration has been there for our farmers and would always be there for our farmers and would always be there for all small business owners. We are there to assist. And it demonstrates how you can take advantage of this and how you can take your business to another level. As you rightly indicated, the watermelon we had there was extra sweet yesterday. And I'm really very happy that Miss Fergus, KL Blends, is doing this. She's right there in a little corner. Many people may not know about her. So next time you're passing on the main road, close to the St. James Anglican Church, go out and check out KL Blends. And what was I was so happy for as well yesterday is that the fact when she came, she said, my son is not feeling well, but she was able to accommodate us. She was so welcoming. She was so spirited in the way she communicated with us. And I really want to say kudos to you, Keisha, on this initiative. We're very pleased with what you're doing, and we hope that your business will grow. People will continue to support, and she's providing a healthy option. She's providing smoothies with fresh fruits and vegetables grown right on her farm, which is next door. As you rightly indicated, Premier, there's so much happening on the island of Nevis. There's so so much happening on Nevis, and Nevisians and residents, you ought to be proud. You cannot afford to let naysayers prevent you from seeing what is happening on the island. I was at a function on Saturday evening, Honorable Premier, the function organized by the Pediatric Assistance League of St. Kitts and Nevis, PALS, at Lescal. And, you know, we had scores of persons who came over from St. Kitts. Apparently, it's an event that happens in St. Kitts on an annual basis. But they brought the event to Nevis this year. And, you know, when I was going around and meeting people and talking with people, having conversations with people, I mean, the people who were there, persons who I was able to speak to from St. Kitts, they were full of praise for what is happening on the island of Nevis. I remember I spoke to two gentlemen who said, listen, when I come to Nevis, I feel like I've traveled overseas. And they said it with no water in their mouth. There was one gentleman there who resides in Canada with his wife. He and his wife were there. And he said, whenever I come to St. Kitts and I travel to Nevis, I feel like I've traveled. I feel like I have gone overseas, even though we are one federation, because of what we are seeing here on Nevis. And, I mean, we here on the island of Nevis, we take everything probably for granted, and we ought not to, because when we compare what is happening here on Nevis to what is happening in the rest of the region, there's no comparison. We are way ahead. And that is why I keep saying it's because we are way ahead why so many people from the other Caribbean islands are coming here. And we here in Nevis are taking it for granted and not appreciating what this administration is doing and appreciating the level of development that is taking place on the island of Nevis. And so, Honorable Premier, as I said, I really enjoyed the tour yesterday, and I'll have to give great kudos to especially young Akisha with that smoothie business. Mm-hmm. And I would ask people to continue to support all the local businesses. And as I speak about local businesses and agriculture, I just want to remind the general public that our huge event is coming up on the 27th and the 28th of March, and of course we know we're gonna have the whole of Nevis there on Thursday and Friday, the 27th and the 28th of March. I remind persons who have not registered yet for your booth that Friday coming, the 14th, is actually the registration deadline. And so if you do not register by Friday, you will not be able to get in. And so I'm asking once again that you go and register at the Department of Agriculture by Friday. I mean, Honorable Premier, I'm sure you saw the quality of the squash day yesterday.
Absolutely.
You saw the quality of the watermelon,
yeah.
And that is only a little taste of what we will see when we come to when we converge on the ETW Park on the 27th and the 28th.
And this is the Agri Expo, of course.
The Agri Expo.
All right. While I have you on the line,
yes.
I know you're the representative for the proud people of St. George, Gingerland.
Yes, sir.
And I happened to be in the area of 869 a couple of days ago.
Yes.
And I was absolutely astonished at the level of investment and construction activity that I'm seeing happening behind the existing 869 structure.
Indeed.
The massive building going up, and a second massive edifice has been laid out. And I was there, and I again commented to myself how tremendous it was to see local investors. These are local people. The days when we step here and we moaned and groaned about foreign investors, and I think, yes, we want foreign investment, but local people who have money to invest are also now stepping up.
Indeed.
And I was very impressed because I see what Sean Rollins and his team are doing there in Gingerland as really transformative for that whole area.
Yes.
You know, Matchman's, not too far from what we would call Market Shop, right there by the high school.
Yes.
And that area I realize now,
it's a hub.
Exactly. So kudos to you as well. It's in your constituency.
Thank you.
And I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing happening up there.
I am very impressed too as well. Every time I drive past there, I look in and I said, well, this is really something huge coming for Gingerland. Well, as a matter of fact, I remember when 869 was open, Sean did make the commitment that he will be doing some additional work there. And to be honest with you, I didn't expect the additional work to come so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to commend him and his team for doing that work and coming so quickly and keeping his promise so quickly. And so I really want to commend him as well. And that's why we're saying, Honorable Premier, I mean, construction is booming on the island, work is available, and people need to take advantage of what is happening in our little beautiful island.
Well, as we wrap up, as you say that, it reminded me that I was in a conversation, I think it was last week, and I was told something that I said I will have to check on in terms of checking with our Labour Department, because this chap was there and the chap said that construction workers are now scarce in Nevis.
They are.
Yeah, he said.
You can't find construction workers now.
That's what he said. So I said to myself, I will have to check. But he was saying that, everybody that he has called is busy. Yeah? And it's very difficult. So again, for those who are refusing to see it, that's a matter for them. But this island is really progressing in leaps and bounds.
Leaps and bounds.
And to God be the glory. May it continue.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a good night. Take care.
Thank you. That was the Honorable Deputy Premier, Honorable Eric Evelyn, calling in to report as usual, and I am grateful to him for his call. As we continue to take your calls at 869-469-1616 and 869-469-1700. Those are the numbers to call to be a part of this show this evening. As we approach the final half hour of the show, I would normally do this at the top of the show, but this is an opportune time for me to express my very deep condolences to the family of Mr. Keith Glasgow, whom we advised passed away in the United States, where he was seeking medical attention. I know Keith's family very well. I am especially fond of his brother Talbot Glasgow, who taught me maths in school and is, I think, one of the geniuses that Nevis has produced. And I was very saddened. I have had the privilege of speaking to Talbot, Dr. Glasgow. I've also spoken to Kinel, the son of Keith, again, whom I know quite well, and express my personal condolences. But now that I'm here on the radio, I would want to join with everyone, because I believe everybody loved Keith, everybody knew him, and he certainly would have contributed significantly in the education field, and later as a permanent secretary. He worked with us as an administration for many years as permanent secretary until he finally retired. And it is a sad thing that he did not get an opportunity really to enjoy that retirement, because he developed some illness and has now succumbed. I just want to express my profound condolences publicly now on his passing, to thank him and to say to his family that the service that he gave to the people of Nevis was exceptional, and that we will always remember his contribution. I spoke to a gentleman this morning who called me on behalf of someone else, but in that conversation mentioned Keith Glasgow and the fact that Keith Glasgow had helped so many, because of course he was permanent secretary and worked with social development and community development, and had really helped a lot of people. A lot of people knew they could go to him. He had a lot of empathy for people. He loved people, and he treated people well. And so I want to use this rostrum to extend my deep condolences on his passing to his family that's left behind, to his siblings, to his son, to all of his relatives and friends, and in fact to the entire Nevision community. He was a good man, and we've lost a good man. I am hopeful that the prayers of the multitude would comfort him, comfort his family, and comfort all of those who mourn the passing of Mr. Keith Glasgow, a stalwart of St. James and a stalwart of Nevis. And I extend my condolences on my own behalf, on behalf of my family, but also on behalf of all of us here on the Mark and on the Von Radio family. Ladies and gentlemen, we're taking your calls. Let me go back to the phone and say good evening. You're on the Mark.
Mr. Brantley, good evening.
Good evening.
One
What about the fisherman pier that need to be fixing?
You're talking about the pier in Charlestown?
Yeah.
Yeah. I confess that pier is not on our immediate budget. We have heard time and time again that we do need to do some work on that pier, but that pier was not one of the projects that we were focused on this year.
Because what happened, the fishermen and them, when you're having a ship and they come across the pier, they're busting battered after the security, and that is not nice.
Well, the busting on the bad road don't have nothing to do with the pier. The busting on the bad road has to do with bad behavior. And so I would encourage persons to behave properly, because, you know, we always encourage each other to do what is right. The ships...
Because when we ask them to go on anchor, they're saying that, oh, they're not going on anchor. And, you know, you're making the tourists and looking back to see all the boats on alongside the pier.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's a matter, I think, that we need to monitor carefully. And, of course, I ask the fishermen to be reasonable, because at the end of the day, the cruise ships only come, as you know, for a very short period, and they don't even come every day. So we can all coexist and cooperate. But in terms of actually fixing up the pier there, we have done some work already, but we don't have anything budgeted to do any more work to it this year. All right?
Okay then. All right.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to the phones and continue to take your calls. Good evening. You're on the mark. Hello? Hello?
Honorable Premier, yes, Eric.
Yes.
Again, I had to call back. I wanted to join you. I regret that I didn't remember to mention it as well. But I had to join you in extending condolences to the family of the late Keith Glasgow. He provided such human service. Of course, you know, he was my permanent secretary when I got into politics for the first time. And he was there to guide me as the permanent secretary in that Ministry of Social Development. He was a tower of strength for me. He was a tower of strength for the ministry. And as you indicated, he helped so many people. That Ministry of Social Development is where everybody turned to. And they turned to me, they turned to the PS, they turned to the other staff members there. But Glasgow was always had a helping hand to extend. You know, we had an excellent relationship. We always joked around with the fact that he taught me at the Gingerland Secondary School. And he would often say, I taught you, and you were my student, and now you're my boss. You know? But we had a great relationship. We, as I said, he helped so many people. I know he continued to teach as well. And a lot of persons would have benefited because of the great person that Keith Glasgow was. He had a heart of gold, and you know, it's really was very hard breaking when we got the news that he had passed at such a young age, still a very young man, you know, and it's really unfortunate, but that is the way things are. Sometimes I want to extend condolences to his family, to his son, to his siblings, to all of Brick Hill, to the staff there at Social Development, because even though he's not the PS, they still feel it very hard, and I still feel it very hard as well, because I said we worked together for 5 years, and he was my first permanent secretary when I became a minister. So we had that very, very strong bond, you know, and so we have lost a great, great man. Nevis has lost a great man, and I just want to say to his entire family, deepest condolences. Your loss is my loss. Your loss is Nevis's loss, and he will always be remembered.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Years to come.
Thank you very much for that, Eric. And before you go, because we said it in the House, but I neglected to say it here, I would also like to extend condolences to another Gingerlander, who is Sharon Walters.
Yes.
Who also would have passed. I would like to extend condolences to her family, her brother Vaughn Walters, whom I know well, and her entire family circle.
Yes.
I was shocked when I heard of Sharon's passing. She too was a very young woman.
Yes.
And she obviously would have succumbed to an illness that she was struggling with.
Yes.
And I would want to join you. I know we did say it in the Parliament
Yes, sir.
when you were there, but I would certainly want to join you on the mark and to share my own deep condolences on her passing to her family, siblings. I believe she had a son, if I recall correctly.
Yes, she have a son, one son.
One son. And
Ryan, I think his name is.
Okay. And to the entire family. So
Yes.
we have lost some very good people, and I want
Indeed.
the family of Sharon to know that they're in our prayers and that we express our profound sympathies on their loss.
Thank you, Premier.
All right? Well, thank
All
you
right.
very much. And I really thank the Deputy Premier for calling in again on both occasions, the occasion of the passing of Keith Glasgow and the passing now also of Sharon Walters, both young people. Sharon is in fact my age, and I regret that to hear that very, very sad and very tragic news. And so we are hopeful that we all will continue to remember their families in our prayers. And for all of those who would have suffered some loss, I extend my deepest condolences to you. For those who might be hospitalized, I extend my prayers that you recover quickly. Let's go right back to the phones and continue with your calls. Caller, could you call back in, please? 869-469-1616 and 1700. The lines are now free. So if you want to be a part of the show, you can definitely call back in and get access to the show this evening. 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. We have about 18 or so minutes left, so we're taking your calls. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Good night, Honorable.
Good night.
I'm calling in for my scripture. Everything sounds good.
All right.
I listen keenly.
What scripture you have for us tonight?
I have Psalm 133. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard that went down to the skirts of his garment, as the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life forevermore. This is God's word, and may He add His richest blessing unto it. You have a good night.
Thank you very much, and thank you for beautiful scripture. Oh, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell in unity. It is 16 minutes to the hour of 10 o'clock. Remember, at 10 o'clock the show is over, so if you want to call, this is your moment. 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. Those will be the numbers to call if you want to be a part of the show this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is On The Mark. I'm your host, Mark Brantley, and I've been here with you since 8 o'clock this evening. We are now going into the last 15 minutes, so that would mean I've been here for an hour and 45 minutes already. And the idea is, of course, to spend time with you from 8 to 10. I am content that I am the only person in the region leading a government that is here every week, opening up myself to questions and comments from you, engaging in dialogue with you, and really just trying to do my part in promoting this whole idea of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, the bedrock of our democracy. And so I look forward certainly to continued good health, so that I can continue to engage with you. And on this show, we invite all shades of public opinion. We talk about news that is not so good news. We talk about news that is great news. We celebrate each other. We commiserate with each other. We are happy together, and we are sad together. The reality is that this show has become part of the tapestry of Nivision life, and for that I am truly grateful. I could not do it without you and your calls. As I said, the phones are open. If you do want to call in and be a part of the show, you are most welcome to do so at 869-469-1616 or 869-469-1700. I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, the issue that we were dealing with on Cuba. I have seen a response from the federal government. It's a response that I support, and I do feel that all of us should support that stance of defending the integrity of the relationship that we have, and that we ourselves are not involved in any way, shape or form in any kind of forced labor. that doesn't happen in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we are standing against it. We have national laws forbidding that, and we are committed to international norms and have signed on to international treaties equally forbidding that. Let me go to the phones and take this call. Caller, good evening. You're on the mark. Hello?
Good night.
Yes, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Mr. Morgan, Cliff Morgan.
Yes?
Better known as Cliff.
Yes, Mr. Morgan.
I want to publicly thank you and you and the administration. When you needed some funds and assistance, you come forward. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm listening. I'm listening, Mr. Morgan. Go ahead.
Yeah. I want to thank there's a lady in government who by the name of Lakeisha Richards that in her test. When I started this journey looking for doctor and so, she was wanting to help me and so. And then it didn't work out. I wanted to work out. I had a friend by the Mr. Huggins. He put me into a guy to a taller. And we found a doctor. Put it on to a doctor down in Santo Domingo. Because my doctor told me I have to go to Colombia, Santo Domingo, or the United States. So, found a doctor in Santo Domingo. And I went to Santo Domingo and get the surgery done. I just want to thank everybody who called for me, pray for me. And now, there's a lady, it's Tony Grove, named Johnny. She went with me.
Yes, I know Johnny very well, yeah.
Yeah, man. So we have to go and look she up, man. She did a good job.
She took good care of you down there?
Yeah, man. You got to understand. She took a good care.
All right.
And the doctor come from the choices. Yeah. Cliff ain't going nowhere with you. Let's I going. Went to the hospital on Tuesday and now she stayed there every night with me. Every night. And let me tell you something. It wasn't for she that was about doing it.
Where in the Dominican Republic you were? In the capital?
No. Go to the capital.
Mm-hmm.
No.
But you were happy with the care you got there?
Oh yes, yeah. The doctor did a good job because when I asked the doctor how long this was going to call, he told me 5 hours. I didn't believe him.
Mm-hmm.
He told me everything went on real nice and so.
Okay. And how are you feeling now, Cliff?
Now I'm feeling lovely.
Okay.
Everything went on nice. Just thank everybody and so.
I'm happy to hear that. You know, when I say I always tease you about the little patwa. Saka fit.
Yeah. Right. Thank for your staff and everything.
All right.
Johnny, man, you did a good job.
All right, man. Blessings.
Okay, man.
Blessings, yeah. May God continue to help you and heal you, okay?
Okay, man.
All right, my brother. Take good care.
Thanks.
All right, good.
Right.
Very thankful for that call, Cliff, and I'm so happy to hear that you're doing better and you referenced some assistance, and we are happy that where people, require that assistance for life-saving procedures that they do, and sometimes may not have all of the resources available to them, then the government has consistently provided support. And so we're happy, Cliff, to hear that you were able to go and that you were able to benefit from that. Let me go back to the phones now. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Greetings, Brother Mark, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
So, hi.
Yeah, right. How are you doing?
It's been a while since I've been on the show. I said, let me call in and give my little 2 pence worth. I want to just comment, though, on the whole situation with Cuba, America, and so on. I don't really separate it from a lot of other things because we see how it is when it comes to the bigger islands. But what is interesting to me, and I think this is really an opportune time for the region, I think this is an opportune time for us to realize that our only hope is a united front, joining up and building our ties with Africa. Africa is awaiting the Caribbean to become the 6th region of Africa. We do not need any other country in this world. While every other country is busy getting a piece of Africa, we as Africans are told to stay away.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying now, let go America, let go Britain, let go all of them. Because once we are joined with a force like Africa, we demand attention. we demand the respect. No one can toss us around and place sanctions here and there because we would have what they want. I think it's a wake-up time for the Caribbean. You as leaders in the Caribbean need now to show what you're really made of. And for me, I would prefer to hear one voice, one response coming from CARICOM, as opposed to all the little leaders have to defend themselves. No, let them realize that they're facing and they're dealing with one sound, as we call it, a united front. You know, so it's an opportune time for we to really live what unity is all about.
So, caller, I quickly pull up on my phone because I published something about a fortnight ago. And this is what I published. I said the international environment now for small states is more difficult than ever to navigate. St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider CARICOM region must understand that wholesale reliance on old Western alliances is unwise. U.S. President Donald Trump has signaled the U.S. move away from large-scale aid and international assistance. Yesterday, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer signaled the UK's move away from aid and international assistance and towards defense. War and preparation for war are now more important than assistance to the world's most vulnerable. As a nation and as a region, we must move with alacrity to forge new relationships and new partnerships with the global South. Now more than ever, St. Kitts and Nevis and the Caribbean must turn their gaze to Africa, Asia, and the Middle East and develop new friends. This has to be our new imperative and a new focus for our diplomacy over the near term. The time for greater South-South engagement is upon us. So it's interesting you call with this tonight because, as I said, sometimes you and I agree, not all the time, but sometimes we agree. And on this one, I think that we agree 100%. I am not suggesting that we abandon existing relationships.
Oh no, but equal respect, you know, not be totally dependent on them so they could call the shot.
I agree. And
right,
I feel that you make, I think, a very salient point that as the rest of the world is rushing into Africa, we who belong to Africa have not been as open and as engaging. And on that note, I think I want to publicly say that Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados has been the only one that we've seen who has really appeared to be engaged with Africa. She recently spoke, I'm not sure if you saw her speech, at the African Union in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia, where she spoke just a few weeks ago there. Right. And I believe that she has really been to Kenya, she's been to Ghana, she's been there in Ethiopia, and she's really sort of beating the drum for that deeper engagement. I'm not seeing the other prime ministers doing as much, but I should add that I just saw news 2 days ago that Afri-Exim Bank, which is based, I believe, in Egypt, that they've now advanced, I think it's a $30 million loan for a resort development in Grenada. So it looks like Afri-Exim is serious about engaging with the region on the financing side of things. So things are happening, but they may not be happening with the speed that all of us would like. And I too would like to see St. Kitts and Nevis do more and the region do more in relation to Africa.
Definitely.
So
okay, man, blessed night.
Yeah, man, it's good that you and I could agree on something.
That's it. You get where you do, but we're still there.
All right, my brother. Thanks. I appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 minutes to go. We're taking your calls. 869-469-1616. 869-469-1700. If you want to be a part of the show, we have a few minutes left. You are absolutely encouraged to call in and be a part of the show this evening. For those who may just be tuning in, this is On The Mark. I'm your host, Mark Brantley, and this show is rebroadcast. Let us remember, right here on Von Radio, the Eastern Caribbean's only powerhouse, on Thursdays at 1 p.m. So let's go back to the phones and take this call. Good evening, caller. You're On The Mark.
Good evening. I would like to send our sympathy greetings to my families, the Brown families and the Walters families, as they lost their loved one, Sharon Walters, and also to her son as well, and also myself as well, because we are one family.
Well, I extend my condolences to you as well, Ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, and I pray that, you'll be comforted. Sharon was loved
Thank
by
you very
everybody.
much.
She was a beautiful person, a
Yes,
beautiful
thank
woman
you.
who was loved by
I
everybody.
called in from all the way in Stacia.
Okay. Well, God bless you. How are things in Stacia?
Oh, very good. And hot sun.
Hot sun.
But we get in the breeze.
Okay, what about rain? You been getting any rain?
Yes, man, we get a lot of rain.
Okay, that's
Can't
good.
complain. God is good all the time.
All right, good. Well, enjoy your time and God bless you and all of Stacia.
Yeah, thanks very much and the same happy return.
All right, thanks for tuning in and thanks for calling.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, all right. We have 4 minutes left and we're taking your calls. 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. Those are the numbers to call. Now, I spoke to the fact that, the international community is becoming quite hostile. And some may argue it has always been hostile, but I think even more so now. I really do believe that Roy, when he called in, made some solid points that we ought to listen to and pay attention to. And the suggestion that we grow closer to Africa, now that is not new for people like Roy and those who are Rastafarian, because they have been preaching the Back to Africa mantra for decades. But as the pressures and as Western alliances seem to be crumbling, as our relationship with Western countries now seems to be unstable, and that instability is not being caused by us but by others, I feel that the time is opportune that we not abandon, of course, our existing relationships with the United States, with Europe, with the United Kingdom, with Canada, but we look as well to new relationships. Just recently I had a discussion on social media about trade and why it is that, say, in the Caribbean region we're not getting goods from Latin America. We're not getting orange juice, we're not getting, chips, we're not getting milk, we're not getting goods. I think we get some pork, I think, that comes from Brazil, and it is possible we get some meat. I know we do see wines from Argentina. But in terms of regular shipping, why is it, for example, we don't have regular shipping lanes with Panama and the Caribbean, with Latin and South America and the Caribbean? Our trading patterns and our business engagements are such that it's almost all of it is coming through the port of Miami. What would happen, for example, if because of some difficulty, whether natural or man-made, the port of Miami were to close its operations, even temporarily? What would happen? I remember during COVID, that was one of our biggest fears as a cabinet, because we did not know what COVID would look like. And we thought to ourselves, if some scientists were to say that it can be transmitted via goods and things of that nature, then we run the risk of the port of Miami closing, and what would that mean for us? We would starve. So these are some of the concerns, ladies and gentlemen, and I just believe that it is time now that we develop new relationships, that we seek where possible to engage, and we strengthen existing relationships, but constantly seek new relationships. Look at geothermal and the fact that the Saudi government, Saudis, I'm proud to say I was the foreign minister when St. Kitts and Nevis established diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. But they've come to our aid on geothermal, a new ally. It tells us what's possible. The banner struck up, it means it's 10 o'clock, it means we have to go. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all those who called, all those who are part of the show, those who listened. We are blessed to be living in a society such as ours. We extend praise to God and thanks to God. And let us continue working together. Let us continue speaking to each other. Let us continue helping each other and lifting up this beautiful island of Nevis and this country of St. Kitts and Nevis. That's our show. Good night and God bless you.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its advertisers.